dear students, you're welcome. Studying the topic on Media 201, General Agriculture, and in this topic today, we'll be completing the previous facilitation where we were talking about propagating materials. We'll be trying to finish up with division, forms, micropropagation, and we'll also be talking about a new topic, which are the climatic factors that affect crop production. Climate, as we all know, very important in crop production, and it talks about the weather condition of a particular place over a long period of time, say 35 years. So these climatic factors that affect crop production include rainfall, temperature, photoperiodism, solar radiation, wind, and also relative humidity. So stay tuned as we go along. Thank you very much. Like I said in the introductory video, you're welcome once again to the seventh topic of AGR 201, General Agriculture, and I still remain your facilitator, Alawude today. My email has not changed at yalawude@noun.edu.ng. And like I said in the previous slide, we will continue with our last facilitation, and we'll be talking today about divisions. Divisions are also types of propagating materials, and divisions are segments produced by cutting or breaking a crown or a clump of suckers. So you use divisions where you have suckers to plant, and the suckers are aerial stems that you have in your pineapple. The top, that crown on the top, okay, can be divided into different sections, divisions. And suckers are area stems from the adventitious buds, and each segment consists of a bud and some roots, which when replanted grows into a new plant vertically to the parent plant. So what they're saying is that this segment, the suckers, contain buds, and when you plant them, you get exactly what you have in the parent plant. So in cocoyam and taro, plants are propagated from young shoots, while in pears, raspberries, also pineapples, the such plants are propagated by suckers. Moving on to the bulbs and cones, like you see in this picture, this is what the bulb looks like. Bulbs are specialized underground stems whose leaves are used as food storage organs. Okay, they are underground stems whose leaves are used as food storage organs. The fleshy stem part is usually very short, compressed, and attached to the basal plate, while the fleshy leaves, that's the bud scale, protect the bud, the terminal bud, which eventually grow into a new plant under, of course, favorable conditions. So that is what bulbs look like. We have them in onions, we have bulbs. So what, like you have seen the description here, that is what you plant if you want to get new plant materials. And bulbs also can be propagated by removing small bulblets. That's the young bulbs. The young bulbs now are called the bulblets or offsets. That's the mature bulblets. Okay, what you do is that you plant them, and large bulbs like in lilies that form the base of the parent bulb. So the small bulbs mature into plants and produce flowers in 2 or 3 years. So they are usually biennials by nature. Now moving on to another propagating material, we have the corm. And the corm is a swollen base of the stem enclosed in a dry scale-like leaf, like you can see in this picture here. You can see this is what a corm looks like. Okay, it's swollen at the base, at the bottom, and it is enclosed in dry scale-like leaves. Okay, scale-like, the leaves are scale-like and dry. and it is a solid stem structure with nodes and internodes. So naturally, the increase of new combs and comels has comb propagation. So when you have a lot of comb and comels, you have a lot of plants. That's what that is saying technically. So you have combs in bananas, you have them what they're usually at the base, so they are very difficult to destroy. Okay, and the same procedure of propagation box applies to the concrete as well as the comel. In bananas, like I said earlier on, corn beads are better sources of planting materials. And why is this so? Why are they better sources of planting materials? Comes Corn beets usually they assure clean planting. Okay, so when you have a corn, you can be sure that the planting material is free of nematodes and weevils, and easily prevent transfer of banana weevils. Okay, because the planting materials are usually free of these things. They do not transfer banana weevils and nematodes from infested bananas to the new plantation. So you can see why it's very advantageous to use the combs. And also, these combs provide enough planting materials. You don't need a lot of them, okay? They provide enough planting materials from the few available and scarce suckers, okay? And it's also easier to treat with furadan, which is a kind of fungicide that is used to treat these combs for better production. The next planting material we'll be talking about now is the runners or the stolons. Okay, runners or stolons that you can see in this picture here. This is what a stolon looks like, and they are lateral stems of vines. You know, these vines look like a rope on the floor. They move. They are lateral. They are long. Okay, so they are lateral stems of vines or crops, such as you have your grass, the sweet potatoes. These plants usually have vines which grow horizontally on the soil surfaces and produce nodal adventitious roots, okay, which subsequently produce plantlets. So what you see from these vines is that you see nodes on them, and when you take those things and then you peg them into the ground, they grow. They also tend to grow plants. So examples of plants propagated by these organs are the strawberries, the yarrow, the sweet potatoes. They use this method of propagation. You can see here, this is the lateral line, these are the vines. So what you take is that you take the vine and then you just peg it to the ground and then you cover it lightly with soil. So when you do so, it grows another root underneath from the side of the bud. And when it has grown to a certain state, you can now sever it from the main source of it. We have the tubers, and tubers are simply specialized kind of swollen, modified, and compressed stem. Okay, and they function as underground food storage organ, developed either from the base of the stem or the root of the plant. This is what a tuber looks like when it is bringing out its buds. You can see this is a potato tuber, okay, and it is already germinating from the buds, from the eyes. That's what they call it, eyes. So this is what a tuber looks like. Now, the tubers of root crops such as yam and Irish potato are sliced into sets. That's mini tubers. You slice them into sets, into smaller pieces, from which auxiliary buds or eyes, like you saw in the previous picture, that is what an eye looks like, sprout into new plants or by planting the whole tuber. So if you have enough planting material, then you can go by planting the whole tuber. Otherwise, you have to split the tuber into sets. And when you split them into sets, you make sure that there are buds on the set that you want to plant. So it's these eyes, these buds that are called eyes that will now sprout into new plants and produce new tubers. In Nigeria here, the sets are treated with pesticide dips, okay, to prevent rotting and to prevent disease attack. What you have to do is that you have to treat those yam sets and you put them inside pesticide pesticide that you have mixed with water to ensure healthy seed yams at harvest. Also, the potato is propagated from roots. It can be propagated from vines as well. So they are capable of producing shoots at the proximal end and new roots at the distal end. So that's an advantage of this vegetable. You can either propagate it by its vines or by the tuber. For the suckers, yeah, that's the next kind of propagating material we'll be talking about, the suckers. And a sucker is simply a branch of the parent material that will occasionally appear in the leaf axil of the plant. And propagation can be achieved by cutting the sucker from the parent plant and rooting in the rooting medium. So an example of crop that you plant this way is the plantain. Like you can see in this picture, these are plantain suckers. And what you do is that you sever the plant when you have harvested the plantain on it, you sever it, and what you get is the sucker underneath. So from this sucker, you can now get many other plants. So that is how you plant your plantain. You sever it on top, and then you plant the suckers in beneath. So it is very difficult to destroy. Okay, plantain suckers are usually very hardy, very difficult to destroy. So that is what we have in plant. The advantages of using suckers is that as compared to that of corn beets, we talked about corn beets and we talked about the advantages. So it is usually easier to prepare suckers for planting. Okay, all you have to do is just to cut the plant down and planting trees. They have this pseudo kind of tree-like form, so it's not really difficult to cut down. And also the ease of identifying the sucker qualities, either the good or bad one. You can see when you look through the parent of the plant, you look at the plantain that it is bringing forth, you can tell if this is a good type of plantain that you want to retain or the bad one when you see that the plantain is not really succulent, is not really big. You can tell by just mere looking at it. So you can know which one you want to continue with or the one that you want to discard. So ease of identifying the sucker qualities is usually very easy to know. And also suckers are best planted at the onset of the rainy season, obviously because you need water, okay, to make them to survive. Okay, so allow sufficient and prolonged water supply. That is why it's important to plant suckers at the onset of the rainy season. There are different types of suckers though. We have the water sucker, which is a weak side shoot with wide leaves or surface runner. We have the sword sucker, which is a side root with a narrow pale sword shaped leaf. Then you have the maiden sucker. This is usually a larger sucker with wide leaves that has not yet flowered. And then you have the peepers, which are young shoots with pale leaves, and the sword sucker. I think this is a repetition, I'm sorry. And okay, the further to note that the sword suckers are the only suckers that are suitable for bananas. So that is what a sword sucker looks like, a side shoot with narrow pale sword shaped leaf. You will see it when the banana tree is growing, you see the sucker growing by the side. That is a sword sucker. So that is what the types of suckers are: water sucker, the sword sucker, the maiden sucker, the peepers, and the sword suckers are suitable for propagating in vanilla. The next slide is talking about the rhizomes, which is another propagating material, and they are horizontal stems running just below the ground. That is what rhizomes are. They are horizontal stems running just below the ground surface, specially modified to uh, store food. Okay, they are food storage organs. This is what they look like. You can see here that these are ginger. This is a ginger rhizome. Okay, so you can see what it looks like. Okay, so they are usually dug up, they are under the ground. And like unlike roots, rhizomes have nodes and internodes, with the nodes containing growing points. The growing point is what is called the eye. So they have the nodes and the internodes, unlike roots. And when you cut these rhizomes in smaller sections or segments, you can have a viable buds that will grow into plants eventually. So what you have to do when you get rhizomes like this is just to target the eyes, and then you cut them accordingly. And when you plant each of these parts, you get another new plant entirely. So it's quite easy. And we are moving to the newest, the most recent type of propagating material or propagating method, which is the micro propagation or the tissue culture. And this is a modern technique of plant propagation based on the principle that each plant cell has the potential to grow into a new plant exactly like the parent plant. So what we are talking about in this scenario is that every plant part has the potential of becoming a new plant material. So you could propagate in this kind of technique. You could use the leaf, you could use the stem, the root, any part of the plant. And all you have to do is just to take a tiny piece of it. And when you mix it under the right environmental conditions and under certain chemicals, you get exactly what the parent plant is from that plant material. So you sometimes they use crushed leaves, sometimes all you need to do is just to get the cell of that plant material. So this is going to the cellular level of plant propagation. And individual plant cells, that's tiny pieces of bud, leaves, and stem, are manipulated under the microscope using certain growth hormones. They are manipulated in a way to enable them to produce a new plant. That is talking about micro propagation, like you can see in this picture here. You are bringing up plants inside test tubes, and it is usually very fast because you get millions of them just from one particular plant material. However, this system has disadvantages and includes the speed. Yes, it's very fast. Speed and efficiency of plant propagation. Also, you produce disease free because this kind of tissue culture is done under very, very sterile conditions. So, no form of infection is around the place. Everywhere is usually very sterile. So, what you get at the end of the day is disease free or aseptic plants. And anything that has advantages must surely have disadvantages. And the disadvantages include spontaneous natural mutations, yes, because we are working at the cellular level. So anything could happen, anything can trigger the cell to misbehave and produce abnormal plants at the end of the day. And again, another disadvantage is that very exact conditions for growing tissue culture. You need very exact. If it is temperature, it should be more than so degrees. If it is water, it should be more than this. If you want to get a perfect result, and it is difficult because what a farmer, before you start explaining to a farmer that this is what you have to do, it's kind of stressful for the farmer because all they know is just go plant their seeds and leave the place. But this one, when you start telling it is quite cumbersome. And you need very exact growing conditions, such as absolute sterile conditions, strict control of temperature, light, humidity, and atmosphere, and all these costly electronic sensors and computer equipment. This is what you need for your micropropagation or tissue. Now, after talking about the propagating materials, you want to know the factors. You now have your materials. Now you want to know the factors, the climatic factors that affect crop production. There are a lot of climatic factors, and first of all, you want to know what climate is all about and the average weather condition of a place. After a long period of time, say 35 years, you want to know the pattern of rainfall, the pattern of temperature, so that you'll be able to know how to plant, when to plant, and how to maximize the conditions for your own crop yield. So climate, especially rainfall, is one of the three most important aspects of the physical environment, which notably influence Nigerian agriculture, and climatic factors such as rainfall and temperature exhibit seasonal variation. Yes, they are usually seasonal. Okay, you have the wet season, you have the dry season here in Nigeria. Those are the basic seasons, the two seasons that we have, the major ones that we have. And these are not only critical in determining crop patterns and systems, but also critical in determining the length of the growing season. So you want to know, if you plant your maize, when are you going to harvest? Are you going to spend 3 months on the field, 4 months? Why is it this? Why is it that? There are so many questions that you can answer. So you don't just want to know the pattern and system of the crop, you also want to know the length of the growing season of the crop. So the first climatic condition we'll be talking about here is the rainfall, and this is the most important climatic variable, and it has far-reaching influence on agricultural crop production. So what does rainfall do? Why is it important? Why do we need rainfall? Number one is that it is the main source of moisture supply to soil. So the soil needs moisture so that it will be able to help the plant, and the plant will be able to absorb water for the use of the plant. So you're talking about moisture supply to the soil for activation of plant growth. The second one is the replenishment of water in the rivers to allow irrigation operation. When rain falls, the rivers get fuller, the seas, the oceans, they get fuller, you get more water for your agricultural production. Also, the build-up of underground water reserves, yes, because when rain falls, water goes into the ground. So when you even want to bore your holes, boreholes, wells, you get underground water reserves through rainfall, as well as the influence on the soil water plant relationship. Yeah, because soil moisture status has a significant and direct relationship to the plant growth. So we have this kind of equation here, like balance equals total rainfall minus runoff plus evaporation. So what we are trying to say here is that the water balance is rainfall subtracted from the runoff, that's the excess water, and evapotranspiration, that one that is inside the air. So you have the total rainfall as runoff water plus the water in the air. However, the effects of rainfall is not underestimated. We have excessive rainfall when the total rainfall is greater than 2,540 millimeters per year in the south. That's when you have excessive rainfall. It's important to note also that you can measure rainfall using your rain gauge, and excessive rainfall has adverse effects on crop production, and this includes high runoff when there's too much of water runs, washes off, and then soil erosion, yes, water that washes off the soil surface. Also leaching, that's taking water quite deep into the soil below the roots so that the roots cannot have access to such water. Also nutrient losses when you're leaching, it leaches the nutrient along with it deep down into the soil where the roots cannot reach it. Also waterlogging, which causes poor aeration, because when when the soil is waterlogged, then the plant cannot breathe. Also vigorous vegetative growth. Yes, you have a lot of weed on the field when there's water. Every crop is happy, including the weeds may not be able to carry out your mechanized farming, you may not be able to do your sowing, even fertilizer application, even pesticide application, because once you do it and the rainfall is like a waste of resources and time. So these are the adverse effects of rainfall in crop. And also that is for excessive rainfall. And rainfall is inadequate when we have less than 101.6 millimeters per year in the north, and makes crop impossible for most of the year, except of course with irrigation. So when rainfall is too low, crops are not happy, the farmer is not happy, because crops cannot grow except of course with practice irrigation. So the seasonality and duration and result of wet season, yes, is usually different. In the south we have almost 7 months of rainfall here in Nigeria, but in the north, some places you have 3 months of rainfall, some 4 months of rainfall, and this year it is even very, very bad because the rain did not start on time this year, so we are just believing that everything is going to be okay very soon. So the seasonality, duration, and regime of wet season and number of months of inadequate rainfall also play an important part in agricultural activities. It's important to note that. What is the importance of rainfall? We talked about the effects, adverse effects of rainfall, excessive rainfall, inadequate rainfall. Now, why is rainfall important? We need it for the suitability of perennial crops. You need them for food generally. So you need them so that these perennial crops can grow. And the possibility of cultivating two consecutive or alternate crops in a year. Yeah, like your maize and cowpea, you want to try and maximize the rainfall period and plant as much as possible two crops at the same time in alternate manner, so that at the end of the day you get your economic value, or at least you even get from one crop if you cannot get from both. Also for the cultivation of vegetables you need rainfall, and the predominance of short season crops, especially cereals. Yeah, like maize, you have some that are 40 days. So you want to use the opportunity to quickly grow as many cycles as you can. So short season crops can be planted during this period. So that is why rainfall is very important. And also the onset of rainfall in ecological zones in March. Yeah, that is when the rain begins in the south, March, and in April rain begins in the middle belt, talking about the Benue side. The southern part of Nigeria, we are talking about the Oyo State, Ogun State, you know, moving southward. And rain starts in May, June in the severe zone, talking about the Tigray, the drier zones of the country. And the latter crop is particularly cultivated in drought-prone areas, which marks the northern limit. Also, farmers have adapted to these periods of water cycle by planting fields with high moisture status and by exploiting soil moisture, which starts between the ends of the rain. So what you do is that you use the soil moisture in the soil to plant your crops and get your results also. So that is it about. Moving to the next climatic condition now, that is the temperature, and when we are talking temperature, we are talking about the degree of hotness or coldness of a particular place at a particular time, and this is important. It is one of the major factors limiting distribution of plants. Yes, some plants will do very well, excellently in the cold weather, cold season. Some will do poorly in the heat, and vice versa. So that is why temperature is important. Is of secondary importance in influencing evapotranspiration. Yes, because the hotter a place, the more evaporation takes place. So you want to try and balance it out, because if the evapotranspiration is on the high side, then you have less photosynthesis, and also the sun will become so hot and unbearable for Now, what are the effects of temperature on the farming system? Yeah, um, temperature. The first one is that rapid soil organic matter decomposition due to high microbial activities. Yes, when the temperature is increased, okay, you have increase in decomposition. All these microbial activities occur fast, 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 and it's increased. There are also increased rates of biochemical reactions. And the B part is that high temperatures render built-in fallows ineffective. Yeah, the built-in fallows for the animals, they can't survive, when the temperatures are high. And also high temperatures enhance the incidence of pathogens and pests. There are some pests that can strive, they can thrive in high temperatures, and you just see them all over the whole place, like your Donoceras, your locusts. They are all over the whole place during the high temperature season. And also, high night temperature favors high respiratory value in rate and exhaustion of plant accumulate. So when temperature is high, respiration is high, and it brings about exhaustion of the plant, and at the end of the day translates to poor crop yield. So the effect of on plant processes is also delayed, like seed germination, pollination, flowering, protein, iron uptake, leaf growth, and cell enlargement. All these things are affected by high temperature. You just see that flowers that are supposed to fruit at certain time, because temperature is high, it is disrupted, and at the end of the day, you get fruits that are shriveled because the temperature is high, the plant is exhausted. All these plant processes are affected. So that's why the effect of temperature on the. Also, if we have the effect, we have to have the solution. So what is the solution? How do we go about it? Number one is that you plant early. Sorry, you harvest early. You don't leave your plants on the field, or else they'll just get burned. So you harvest crop early, and then you practice mixed cropping such that you have to plant a crop that can serve as a soil cover to cover the soil and maintain and keep the temperature intact. And the other crop you use them to get your economic value. So you can practice mixed cropping, also mulching. What you do with mulching materials is that you use it to cover the soil and preserve the soil temperature. And also another point is minimizing runoff or erosion as much as you can. You try and minimize it. And organic matter supply in decaying residue. That is important to keep the soil temperature in check. You can mix the soil with organic materials, and also high nutrient supply. When the soil is filled with nutrients, then the plant can have something to take up. And also you suppress the weed growth, because weed will always compete with your plants, and the temperature is high already. So the weeds will just make everything to be more difficult. So number eight, you protect and you shade your soil. You plant breaks everywhere that will help you to serve as shade for your soil. Those are the solutions to high temperature. The next climatic factor we'll be talking about is solar radiation. And like you can see in the picture here, solar talks about sunlight. Okay, solar talks about sunlight, and it's just the surface reflectivity over different agricultural crop surfaces. We have the net radiation, PAR, that's the photosynthetically active radiation, and energy budget and relationship of solar energy to dry matter production. Yes, so what you want to know is, how does solar affect dry matter production, and how does it affect the economic part of the plant, and what implications does this solar have on crop production? These are the things that you want to know with solar radiation. You can see here in the picture, the sunlight emits its rays, and it helps to, it helps the plant to respire. It helps the plant to get carbon dioxide for photosynthesis, and also helps the plant to release oxygen into the air. So that is it about solar irrigation. Solar irrigation is essentially important during photosynthesis, like I said, which utilizes visible light to produce dry matter from water and carbon dioxide. Photosynthesis is a process whereby the plants manufacture their food using water, CO2, and light energy. So this reaction takes place and carbohydrate is formed, which is taken up by the plant, and oxygen is also formed, which is released into the atmosphere for us to use. Also, dry matter production depends on incoming solar radiation. Yes, how much sun can the leaves of the plant capture and use for dry matter production. That is what solar radiation is all about. Relative humidity is another important part of the climatic factors, and relative humidity talks about the ratio between the amount of water vapor actually held in the air and the maximum possible amount that can be held at a particular temperature. So we are talking about water vapor, that is relative humidity, how much can be held in the air at a particular temperature. So it's the measure of the dampness of the atmosphere, and this in turn translates to the crop, because if the relative humidity is too high, then there is usually prevalence of pests and diseases on the crop, and if the relative humidity is too low, then the plant is usually dried out because there will be dryness everywhere, there won't be moisture. So that is important. Like you can see in the picture here, this is a hot summer day, relative humidity is 50%, and a cold summer, cold autumn day, relative humidity is usually higher. So sorry about this. Equals to 70%. So sorry about that. So that's the measure of the dampness of the atmosphere. Relative humidity increases, yeah, high relative humidity, like I said before, increases disease incidence on crop farms and reduces the crop's ability to intercept solar radiation. Yes, when everywhere is too cloudy, the clouds will shade the sunlight, and then the plants will not be able to trap the sun rays. Contrarily, low relative humidity leads to high evapotranspiration, so the transpiration is high and will eventually cause wilting of crop stand. So that is how relative humidity affects crop. Also, the next important point is the day length and the photoperiodism, photoperiod, and this simply indicates the length or duration of sunlight hours per day. The length or duration of sunlight hours per day. Sometimes we have long days, sometimes we have short days, where you have the hours in which the sunlight is higher than the that's the day hours is higher than the night hours. We have a longer day. If it is the other way around, then we have a shorter day. So this is important. This variable is important, and it builds the movement of the sun either on the northern or the southern hemisphere. You can see over here in the picture, this is the sun. So it depends on where it turns to. The earth turns to the direction of the sun. Okay, and these trends also affect wind movement and rainfall occurrence. How does day length affect crops? It affects the flower and tuber formation. It also affects vegetative development, because when there are long days in some crops, you just see that they will just continue growing vegetatively, they won't flower. Okay, and some crops, when they have short days, that's when they will flower early. So it affects flowering and tuber formation, and also seed germination. For example, in rice and soybean, varieties. Some of them are very sensitive to photo period. And the timing of agricultural operations such as planting, harvesting, and types of crops to plant is also important in the day length of. On the basis of photo period, there are three groups of plants. We have the long day plants, and these are plants that grow or flower under day length of less than 14 hours. We are talking of less than 14 hours. That's when they flower. For example, the Irish potato, the wheat, barley, oats. These crops flower under day length of less than 14. And then we have the short day plants, which are crops that are induced to flower under day length less than 10 hours. So we are talking about crops like sweet potato, maize, and soybeans. They flower under the day length of less than 10 hours. And there are some crops that are not even affected at all, either short day or long day. They are good to go, and they are called day nutrient plants. They are not affected by day length. And for example, an example of such plant is the cowpea. So talking about the winds and ocean currents, there are two basic major types of wind air masses in West Africa. The first is the equatorial maritime air mass, and this is usually moisture laden in the south west monsoon winds. And the second one, which is the tropical continental air mass, and usually characterized by dry and dusty northeast trade harmattan winds. So we have these two air masses where we have the one that is moisture laden, which is the Victoria Maritime Air Mass, and we have the dry, dusty one, which is the Harmattan Sea wind of the tropical continental air mass. And the meeting point of these two air masses, the point at which both of them meet, is what is called the intertropical front. And the relative dominance in rain, these winds bring in rain, and they also bring in the harmattan. So that is why winds are important, because they are the ones that translate to rainfall and also the harmattan. Having said this down, we have come to the end of this lecture, and your class activity, I would like to mention 5 propagating materials, try and discuss any three, and also try and discuss, explain the climatic factors affect crop production. It's important that you do so because we are going to look at discussion forum. Thank you once again for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful day.